Welcome to We Chat Divorce, hosted by Karen Shalhoub, Legal Liaison, and Catherine Shanahan, CDFA. Each episode, we sit down with divorce professionals and industry experts to provide insights and frank discussions about real people, real situations, and real divorce to help you achieve your best life post-divorce. This episode of We Chat Divorce is brought to you by My Divorce Solution, offering divorce financial planning so clients can secure the divorce settlement they deserve. Visit mydivorcesolution.com to request access.
Welcome to the Divorce Explored series of We Chat Divorce. I'm Karen Shalhoub.
And I'm Catherine Shanahan.
I want to start today with something we see all the time at My Divorce Solution. A client came to us recently, married over 20 years, what some people now call a gray divorce, a divorce later in life where the financial stakes are often much higher because there's been much more time for assets, debts, and complexity to accumulate. She would have told you that her marriage was stable. She would have told you that they were fine financially. But when we started building her financial portrait, she could not name half the accounts in the household. There was a brokerage account she had never seen a statement for. There were 2 retirement accounts she did not know existed. And there was a line of credit tied to both of their names that she had no idea was open. She was not irresponsible. She was not uninvolved. Her spouse had simply handled the financial side of the marriage, and she had trusted that arrangement. And honestly, that arrangement works until it doesn't. Until divorce puts every financial detail on the table and one spouse realizes that they have been living inside a financial structure they can't describe. Catherine, we see this pattern constantly, every day. When someone comes to us and they've been the financial non-managing spouse, let's talk about what that looks like by the time they reach us.
You know, it's so often, truth be told, here's a little guilty pleasure of mine. I watch The Real Housewives. And there have been numerous shows. These women live elaborate lifestyles, so they show, right? And there have been multiple episodes in each of the series where these women are going through divorce and they sit there and they talk about, I don't know where the mortgage is. What do you mean I have a mortgage? What is a mortgage on my house? You know, I don't know what the utilities are. I don't know what bank accounts, and they're saying this live on TV. Mm-hmm. And I sit there dumbfounded, like I want to call into the show. And this is what we hear all the time. You know, you live your life and like you said, it's working until it's not. Or you use the word, Karen, stable and fine, right? Stable and fine to me are not good words in a relationship. And so there can be that point in time where you'd both agree that one would be the financial leader of the family, and the other one usually is the CEO of their household, right? And that's fine because that's how life is going, if you want to call it fine. But there comes a point in time that you have to shift gears and you have to come back and have a conversation, because it's not even just divorce. It's if your spouse dies. You know, how do you know how to go access an account? What account do you access? You know, what do these accounts actually mean? So it's about having that communication and coming back and reestablishing your right to know this information. So even if you haven't been going to your accountant to do your tax return with your spouse, or your spouse has been doing it by themselves, let there be a point in time before divorce that you actually get involved with knowing this information, or where even to find this information. Because there are so many people that when they come through our process, what do you mean we had 2 retirement accounts? You know, what do you mean we have a life insurance policy that has cash value? You know, I didn't know that, or I thought we just had these 2 accounts. And it's eye-awakening. And then you feel so bad about yourself. Like, why didn't I know this?
For sure. And it only comes into play when a trigger happens, right? Mm-hmm. And that brings us to today's topic. There's been so much conversation lately around Belle Burden's memoir, Strangers, especially after the Oprah interview. And what it surfaces for us here at MDS as professionals who work inside the financial side of divorce every day is exactly this question. What happens when one spouse has been living inside a marriage without enough visibility into the finances? Most of the conversation around strangers has focused on the emotional side. The betrayal, the shock, and all of that is real. It is real. But what we want to talk about today is the financial side, because at My Divorce Solution, the pattern we see over and over is this: being supported financially is not the same as being informed financially. Look, this episode is not a book review. That's not our intent here. It's a divorce financial conversation about what the non-managing spouse still needs to know, what you need to know, and why that lack of financial clarity can become so costly when divorce begins. So let me start. It's not about blaming the spouse, but divorce has a way of exposing whether that arrangement was simply a division of labor or whether it created actual financial dependence. Because when one spouse suddenly has to make decisions about support, property division, debt, cash flow, housing, and long-term planning, it becomes very clear whether they have enough information to protect themselves. Most often they do not. Even if one spouse is the financial manager of the household, the other spouse still needs a working knowledge of the financial structure of their life.
You know, so many people are afraid to have the financial conversations, right? They're afraid to ask about an account or what a 1099 form is, or what are these documents that we have to collect for our tax returns. I bring up tax returns a lot because that's when a lot of people feel uneasy. They don't know what they're signing, and they don't really know the supporting documents, what they mean or where they're coming from. So that's why I bring that up a lot. It's a good time to start gathering that information. But don't be afraid to have these conversations with your spouse now or before you're getting divorced. Start planning for yourself so you can make these decisions. You know, being the financial manager of the house seems like an easy path to take for people. Like, I want to put my head in the sand and I don't need to know about all of this information. But it does become scary when you can't feel independent. Nobody wants to feel dependent on someone. Emotionally, a lot of people are codependent on each other. And I see that all the time. But when you're dependent on someone financially, it's not a good look. And I'm sure it brings some cracks in the marriage too, because you're hiding something, right? There is financial infidelity as well, financial control. And that's why if someone's controlling you, you're afraid to ask this. But you know, you'll feel so much better about yourself getting this information. It does come to light when people go through divorce. We hear, I'm sorry all the time. I'm sorry, I don't know this. I'm so ashamed, I don't know this. And that's okay. But now you have to take control of that and get this information. I mean, we talk about this all the time with our clients when they go through and get prepared. And the light bulb goes on, like, oh, that's what that account is. You know, I talked to you, I think this morning, about a case yesterday. You know, when someone hands you a spreadsheet and you see these numbers on it, and it looks like, okay, we're each getting the same amount of money on the column. Do you really know what those accounts are? Does one have a tax impact to it? Does the other one carry a cost basis that will cost you more to keep it? Is one even liquid to you? Is there a cost to liquidate an account? You know, so you can't just look at a spreadsheet and feel like you're in the know, but it's a good starting place to know that we have these sort of accounts. But you have to take control when you're going through your divorce so that you can actually advocate for yourself.
For sure. And, you know, I want to underscore what you just said, Catherine. You know, if you are not financially informed in the marriage and aren't contributing to making decisions, family decisions financially, then when you start approaching divorce, or if divorce is essentially handed to you, when you start asking these questions, they almost seem antagonistic because those conversations have never been had. And so you're creating conflict where, you didn't intend it to be, but it's something that could definitely be prevented when you're facing this time of life.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about, what does someone need to know? Well, they need to know what exists, what bank accounts are there, what investment accounts exist, what retirement accounts, what real estate you own, are there business interests, stock options, deferred compensations, trusts, partnership interest. You also need to know what is owed: mortgages, credits, tax liabilities, line of credits, business debts, personal loans, student loans. Are they marital, separate? That's what we get into. Whose name is attached to those obligations? What's joint, what's separate, and what may still require a deeper review? You need to know how cash flow works. What comes in each month? What goes out each month? What are fixed expenses? What are variable? What's discretionary? What does it really cost to maintain your lifestyle? And another important thing you need to know is how these assets and debts are titled. It matters because in divorce, title, classification, documentation, and tracing all matter, especially when third parties are involved. And that's what a financial portrait does. Takes all of those scattered pieces and organizes them into a verified, complete picture before anyone sits down to negotiate.
Okay, you're listening to what Karen just said, and like me, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack in that, right?
Yep.
And if I can just kind of remember what you said and go back a little bit to further explore some of these things and maybe share some examples if we can recall them. Let me start with it. You mentioned classification and documentation and knowing how things are titled. Oftentimes people don't think that's important. They just want to know what the value is and who's keeping it, or that means nothing, they can have it. But it really is important. One scenario that I want to share is when you came across a business entity that was owned with another outside party. And you mentioned the judge just said, oh, you could go sell that and split it. Well, how do you just go sell something? Did the judge know there's a third party listed on that business? You just can't go sell it. And if you do force the sale of a business, how does that impact any kind of financial support you may be getting, spousal, alimony, whatever your state calls it? How would that affect that? So it is important to know these things. How many times have people said, I'm not on the mortgage, Karen? And we say,
So
okay, well, wait a minute. We've pulled your deed. We've pulled your mortgage. You are on the mortgage. You might not see your name on the statement, and good for you for looking at a statement. But just because your name is not on that statement doesn't mean you're not attached to that mortgage.
So true.
What are some other things you said? Oh, personal loans. Okay. How many times do people get credit reports? Not your credit score, but your report, and you find out, oh gosh, my spouse opened another account in my name, or your spouse finds out that you opened a credit card that they were unaware of, and you didn't disclose it. So we have to disclose all of these obligations.
Yeah. Co-signing for adult children or for third parties, for friends, family, those are obligations of the marriage.
Another one, a client yesterday, I was going through her initial portrait review, and at that step, we're verifying the information and the assessment that we did. And she was, adamant that the two, her one checking, one business, one checking and one savings was the business. And, if it's part of the business, it goes part of a business valuation. It doesn't go on the personal side, right? So we were able to quickly pull up the documents because of our process and our portal. And yes, one was listed with the business, but the check-in was actually listed personally. So you can't include that in a business valuation and then double dip and include it in personal and vice versa. So you have to understand how your account is actually titled.
And we see so many businesses now being created, startups, other business ventures where, personal money is loaned to the business. So all of a sudden, that's an asset of the marriage, right? And that gets missed routinely because unless, you have a financial person in there for looking at these types of documents, that's not going to get extracted.
Oh, that's a big one, Karen. That actually came up this week. We have a client who, I don't know, does spouse own it with another person? Okay. And he made a personal loan, which would have been a marital loan. They've been married 16, 17 years, I think. And the company has been paying him back. And I asked her, where is that? First of all, she didn't know about it. She kind of knew about it, so I'm going to give her some credit there. She didn't really know the details to it, but she kind of remembered the conversation that he said he was loaning the company money. But I said, where are the payments being deposited? Do you see them being deposited into your joint account? She said, I have no idea. So great. We just mark it. We mark the considerations. We put together the questions to ask, and it's something that could have been easily overlooked.
Absolutely. So this is where what we say risk becomes very real, because in divorce, you're no longer or even negotiating a postnuptial agreement, you're no longer just living inside the financial system. You will be asked to evaluate it, explain it, divide it, and make decisions around it.
And
And you
Karen,
go ahead.
I know this book has been causing a fury of attention, which of course we love because her book is stuff we live every day. But it is an awakening to be aware of the things that we are mentioning here. A lot of times we're in the space where people are thinking divorce, and thinking divorce doesn't typically happen overnight. It's a 3-year minimum process, probably, right? If you're thinking it. So if you happen to be one of those people thinking it, or you're afraid to get started, or you want to send this episode to somebody, if you're thinking it, you should re-engage in getting a hold of your financial data and understanding it, because that reality check could make the decision for you to stay or go. We have so many scenarios where spouses think that, we have no money. I don't know how I'm going to do this. My spouse says we have no money. And anytime the divorce word came up, he'd say, you're not getting anything. Everything's in my name. You're not getting it. It doesn't matter so much who an asset is titled to during your marriage. We need to determine if it's marital or not, but you need to have that information for yourself. If you've been financially controlled for your whole marriage, what makes you think you won't be controlled going through a divorce unless you become financially informed? And that's really what we are all about, getting that financial knowledge. Because if you're getting blindsided by an affair or any kind of emotional strain, it's even worse to find out that you've been financially abused during this relationship. So you have to unwind all of that before you take that next step, because it does matter the path you take going through divorce. It's a costly mistake to take the wrong path.
Absolutely. And you don't want to take the ownership baton, like the knowledge baton from your spouse, and just hand it over to your attorney, because you're left out of the mix and you can't make really good decisions when you're in that space.
Mm-hmm.
So, you would be already entering the process already behind. You may not know what documents to request. And that's where the spiral of legal fees and divorce fees begin. So that your confusion is not a minor inconvenience. It can affect your pocketbook, and so many people in this situation don't even have access to accounts. They just have a credit card, right? That's paid off at some point. So it can affect your access to money. It can affect strategy, settlement posture, and your ability to make decisions under pressure. So, in some cases, as we all know, this lack of visibility is not accidental. Financial control in a marriage can look like protection from the outside. One spouse saying they can handle everything. But if you have no access, no information, and no understanding, that's not really protection.
Yeah, it's financial control. Again, we always talk about and want to hear the emotional side of a divorce. Everyone, what's a good divorce story? They want the drama of it. And again, I'll talk about the Real Housewives again, because I would love to get on every one of those episodes when they talk about this. The infidelity part emotionally is terrible. I totally get that. But the financial side is even worse, because that's where your independence comes, right? It could take years to get over an emotional affair or a physical affair. But how do you get over financial abuse if you don't take control of knowing what these assets actually mean? And it's actually kind of sexy to know your financial. You have good conversation, you hear things in the news, and you get it. Oh, yeah, I know what that is. You don't have to be a stockbroker, but just to know a term and understand the impact of that. I'm telling you, you're going to sit a little taller. You're going to walk differently into a room, and you're going to sit and listen to a conversation much differently when you have some financial knowledge.
For sure. So I want to start talking about financial autonomy. What does financial autonomy actually mean? We talk about this a lot with our clients. And I remember growing up being raised by parents whose, my father managed the household and my mother knew nothing. And I remember thinking to myself as a small child, I will never be in this situation. I will not. And so by virtue of that, I've always been the financial manager of my households, just because it really made me uncomfortable the way my mom had to respond to my dad when they were making financial decisions.
Which is actually kind of funny, not to interject here, but
Yeah.
I'm the CDFA. I have the accounting degree, and you run all of our finances for the company. And I have no problem with that. But I mean, you're the same way here, which is actually awesome. I applaud that.
Yeah, thank you. So, the distinction matters a lot, and it connects to why the stranger's conversation resonated with so many people. Financial autonomy does not mean every spouse or both spouses needs to manage every transaction. It doesn't mean distrust. It doesn't mean separate financial lives. It means awareness, access, understanding to avoid being financially lost inside your own marriage. Even if you have some comfort with that, it's not a good situation. A spouse does not need to be the financial manager to be financially informed. And frankly, you should not have to choose between being a trusting partner and being a prepared adult. They should go hand in hand. So, to clarify, this isn't just a woman's issue. We work with men and women who have been on the outside of the financial picture. The dynamic is the same regardless of gender. If you do not have visibility into the finances of your own marriage, you are at a disadvantage when divorce or somebody gets sick or someone passes or someone becomes incapacitated. Things can go south. And even though I am financial manager of my family, I ensure that my spouse knows where things are and understands what things look like.
Yeah. And you do that with me at work as well. So I can vouch for that. But I want to take that word autonomy and put a different word to it. It's for me, it's respect, right? So if your spouse does not give you that autonomy, they're not respecting you. And if you want to live in a marriage with no respect, that's your choice. But if you want to ask for respect through the divorce, that probably is not going to happen if you didn't get it during the marriage. But the word going through divorce then is transparency. So when your spouse wants to negotiate with you, or you want to advise your attorney how to negotiate for you, you need transparency of this information. And that's all you're asking for. So autonomy and transparency are not taking control of anyone other than yourself. So don't feel shy or embarrassed to ask for either of these. And if your spouse is saying things to you like, because typically a financially controlling spouse, good or bad, says to you, you're going to be okay, I'm going to take care of everything. If you're directing your attorney and they're saying, yes, it depends, but we'll go for that. Yes, we'll get that back. Okay, those to me are not transparency or autonomy. It's getting the documentation. When you get the documentation to your marital estate, somebody is showing you respect. Somebody is being transparent with you. And then you can move. And that's when we know what pathway you can go down, right? So demand this of yourself, to ask for this information. Be brave to ask for this information, whether you come through our process and we help you get it, or you say it to your spouse directly, or you have to lead your attorney down that road. Know that you're not trying to create, what do you call it? Not chaos, but
conflict, adversity.
Yes, thank you. You're trying to get financially informed so you make really good decisions for yourself, and not only for yourself, but for the entire family. Because sometimes a spouse could be offering you something that might not look good or feel good to you, but it might be good for you, and it might be good for the whole family. But you'll never know that if you don't have the information to verify it.
Absolutely. And look, no one's going to dispute that bookkeeping is not tedious, or knowing the information is not tedious. It is. So give yourself some grace. Start with the basics. Start with your accounts, and then you can move on. We have lots of good checklists on our website, but give yourself some grace that you don't have to get it all done in one day, because that's not how you're going to learn in any event. It is a little bit like going back to school, but it's so important. Having that financial clarity is going to position you not only to stay in a marriage, but if you are facing divorce, you are positioned to at least be able to disclose what you have with the documents and at least present that, so that then you could understand how those are further interpreted in a divorce situation. So this conversation around strangers has opened a door that a lot of people needed opened, clearly, and we're glad it's happening. But beyond the emotional impact, there is a financial reality underneath that story, and underneath thousands of stories like it. Many of you are out there experiencing that. If one spouse has been managing the money, if your spouse has been managing the money, you do not need to become an accountant overnight, just as I said, but you do need enough knowledge to understand, and you can do that one step at a time. Because in divorce or separation, the cost of not knowing can be significant, because when you enter separation or divorce, you have to even learn a new language of the whole process and learn your finances. It can be quite challenging. So we promote here financial clarity before settlement. That is the work. And that is why we built the MDS Financial Portrait. This is Divorce Explored, and I'm Karen Shalou.
And I'm Catherine Shanahan, and I want you to know that it's never too late to change your relationship with money. And I hope that's what this book is really bringing out to everyone. We do have this judgment-free space where you can come and ask your questions without a judgment response. Do it for yourself. If not for anything else, just do it for yourself.
I 100% agree. And even though I'm financial manager, I don't have financial degree. I didn't go to CPA school or anything like that. And Catherine, I'll often say to Catherine, that is rocket science. And she'll say, no, it's not. And, understanding how accounts play through is one thing, but understanding what accounts exist is something that you can confidently do on your own.
And we're so passionate. We're so passionate about this topic, and that's why I actually haven't read the book, but I just love the financial conversation we can make out of this book, because it's stuff we preach all the time, and we want to get on the news and shout this out there about the financial piece. But you and I have the privilege and the honor of bouncing things off of each other, what the hundreds of our clients have gone through. And so when I say it's not rocket science, it's because I'm seeing it. And now you ask me questions, really good questions. And I see you answering them now, and how you look at things. And I ask you questions where we get to ask each other these questions. And then when we hear all these stories and we developing this process, we realize the void out there. And we just don't want anyone to be afraid to get this information, because once your divorce papers are signed, it's over. Everyone goes home, and you're stuck with what you're stuck with, good, bad, or indifferent. And so even at that point, you're going to have to understand the impact for the rest of your life, what choices you have to make for yourself financially. And so we just want you to make these decisions really informed. We want you to be able to advocate for yourself with your attorney, with your mediator, with your spouse, with whoever, with your next relationship. So get this information. It's really important, and it will change the way you go through the divorce process.
So if you're trying to understand what you have and what you owe and how financial decisions may affect your future, again, we are here to help. Visit us at mydivorcesolution.com. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of We Chat Divorce. We hope this episode was informative and supportive on your divorce journey. If you're looking for more support for navigating divorce with confidence and clarity, head over to mydivorcesolution.com for more podcast episodes, divorce events, and resources for your divorce. We'll see you back here for our next episode.